Well, buckle up because if you're a fan of 3 of the 4 teams in the NFC South, you might not like very much what I'm going to say about their performance in last month's NFL draft. Not impressed, to put it lightly. Now, I thought one team, the Bucks, kind of stood out a little bit. I'll get to them later. But for now, we're going to crap on a couple of teams. We're going to start with the Atlanta Falcons. And I know I've talked about this ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go too much more, but I just keep coming back to the Michael Penix Jr. selection at 8. It was the shocker of this year's draft, and it was the shocker because it was really stupid, right? Like, wasn't the point of signing Kirk Cousins to punt on this type of decision? I mean, seriously. What was the point of breaking the bank for Kirk just to sit there and invest the 8th pick on his backup? And if you were going to do this, why not just draft J.J. McCarthy? Like, I could go on and on here. Now, ultimately, Atlanta in the long run could be proven right. Michael Penix at age 27, 28 takes over as the starting quarterback. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe he will finally learn how to be an accurate thrower of the football, but golly, I'm just saying. And then you follow that up like, that was one thing. But apparently they were trying to trade back up into the top half of round 1 for an edge rusher. Like, what the fuck were the Falcons doing? And you could see that desperation to get some help on the defensive line in round 2 when they gave up 79 in the 3rd round to move up from 43 to 35 for Ruke or Horhoro. I think I said that right. I hope I got it close enough. Felt like a tad bit of a reach there. I thought there were better defensive linemen on the board at that point, and then to trade up for it. Like, they came back, got a couple other nice selections like Braylon Trice in round 3. At one point in time, he was being mocked as a first-round pick. I thought he was solid value there. I think Brandon Dorless can contribute as well. But I gave the Falcons a firm D here. I wasn't trying to be too harsh in saying F, although I absolutely could justify that at this time. Just not a fan of their approach at all. In terms of the Carolina Panthers under new general manager Dan Morgan, like, some of this, what I'm talking about as a grade, is already at like a sunk cost, but I got to factor it in, right? They ultimately turned Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Darnell Wright, Tyreek Stevenson, Torrey Taylor, and a 2025 second-round pick into Bryce Young. Whoopsie daisies. Like, that's bad, right? And then when you think about, a couple of years ago, the reports of the Rams were willing to give up 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns, and the Panthers turned it down to only now later in this past offseason trade Brian Burns and get a second-rounder and a conditional 5th-rounder out of it. Yeesh, right? Unbelievable. It wasn't all bad for Carolina. I will say this. I like the focus and the approach on let's get some help. Let's get some help for Bryce Young. So the approach was there. Like, I like that they bumped up to 32 to get that 5th-year option for Xavier Leggett, and it only cost a pick 200 to do so. Trevin Wallace has a nice athletic profile. I think he can outplay his draft position. Again, on the offensive side of the ball, I thought Jatavian Sanders was a steal early in round 4. I was really surprised he was there. And then you look at round 2. Jonathan Brooks, he's that 3-down type of back. I know he's coming off the ACL injury, but at that spot, he's worth the flyer because he can certainly outplay his draft position when he's fully recovered from the knee injury. You still got to give the Panthers like a D+ or D grade because of the bigger picture things. But there were some things I liked about their draft, and in particular, I liked how they were focused on the offensive side of the ball where they needed to be. Now, the New Orleans Saints, like, there are some teams that get addicted, it seems like, to investing incredibly high picks on certain positions. Like the Matt Millen Lions of the 2000s, right? Every fucking year. Whether it's Charles Rogers, Roy Williams, Mike Williams in 2003, 4, 5, taking 3 wide receivers in the top 10 in 3 successive drafts, then take a year off in 2006 to come right back again in 2007 and take Calvin fucking Johnson. It took them 4 tries to finally draft a Hall of Fame wide receiver in the top 10, but there you go. You remember for many, many years, the Texans, every time you turn around, They fucking drafted another defensive lineman in round 1. And then finally in 2011, it's like, hey, let's draft another one, and it's J.J. Watt. And there they drafted a future first ballot Hall of Famer. You know, the Saints have invested a shit ton in their offensive line in terms of premium and first-round picks over the years. And they did it again with taking Tyrese Fuaga at 14. Maybe the secret is they've invested so much, they finally get it 100% right, and Fuaga's going to be a Hall of Famer someday. Who the fuck knows, right? But with the injury and the potential for career-ending injury for Ryan Ramczyk, I guess this pick made sense. I like them moving up just a little bit in round 2 to get Kool-Aid McKinstry. He was a guy that certainly had a lot of like first-round mocking throughout the past season. They only gave up 168 and 190 to go get him. Their third rounder was traded as part of the Sean Payton deal. What that yielded them was 29 last year and 45 in this year's draft. They gave up 116 in this year's draft in last year's deal when they traded up for Jake Haener. And then they turned around and drafted Spencer Rattler in round 5. So that's a little confusing. I gave him like a C- here, because it certainly wasn't a wow draft. Not a lot of impact that I see coming from this class. Fuaga should be pretty good wherever they end up playing him on the line. I think McKinstry's at minimum a solid starter, but not much else there. And then you give up a 4th rounder in this year's draft last year for Haener, just turn around and draft yet another quarterback. And it feels like you're overinvesting a little bit in third-string QBs, in my opinion. I think the team that easily did the best in this year's draft in the NFC South was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I love that Graham Barton pick at 26. He, to me, was one of the safest players in this entire draft class. He's the type of guy you say he's going to be a 10-plus year starter in the league. He's going to get a second contract from the team, and you're going to feel happy that you did it. Just a good mix of, like, at pick 26, let the board fall to you. Positional value meets positional need. Like, that's how you want the draft to work, right? And it worked well for them. They addressed the trenches again in round 2 with Chris Braswell. Can always use more depth in terms of edge rushers. I think Tyke Smith is going to be a year 1 nickel dime kind of defensive back. I think Jalen McMillan from Washington can be their slot receiver, or a guy that can contribute alongside Evans and Godwin and so forth. I think Bucky Irving's going to be a nice complement to Rachaad White. So I think they got some decent value out of this draft. Like, it's not a super sexy draft by any means, but Barton was the big deal here because he's a guy that you say it's really hard to envision where he won't work out really well at the NFL level. But when I compare it to like the Saints and the Panthers and the Falcons for different reasons, I do think the Bucs had the best of the draft classes here in the NFC South.